But the talks have been going for some time. Little was achieved this time round, and September is the next target. Is there renewed hope that a deal, even a small one, could be achieved?
I think it will take a while before the two of them settle the differences amongst themselves.
What would it take, you think?
Well, I think at the highest level, I think both sides need to have some trust with each other, and then both sides will need to make some structural adjustments to their own domestic economies in order to deal with each other as equals and to deal with each other confidently.
The global economy is already reeling from, the trade tensions. We have PMIs pretty much across the board, across the world, easing. For a country that's so exposed to trade, so exposed to exports, what do you think are the prospects for the rest of the year?
Well, we are not just looking at the short-term numbers, but more importantly, Singapore is always focused on the longer-term structural and fundamental issues. In the short term, we can all expect some gyrations in the numbers, some fluctuations in the numbers because of the uncertainties over the U.S. China trade negotiations, Brexit, the Japan-Korean spat, the situation in Hong Kong, and so forth. So all these uncertainties will certainly add to the volatility of the market in the short term. But for Singapore, I think we are focused on the long term to see the kind of investments that we can get to restructure our economy. And to that front, we are quietly confident. So amidst all these shifts, we are seeing more companies coming to Singapore to put their investment here. And these are huge investments for the long haul. You see ExxonMobil, GSK, Becton Dickinson, Lindt, and yesterday Nestle. All of them come to Singapore for a few simple reasons. The long-term political stability, the pro-business environment, our ability to adjust our regulations to support their business operations ahead of time, the access to talent, stable tripartite relationship, and so forth. So these are the long-term fundamentals that will put us in good stead, and we are confident.
Are those companies coming here because of the diversion due to the trade war?
Quite a bit of that. I'm sure that is in their considerations because in a very volatile global environment, people are looking for a safe harbor for talent and their intellectual property protection. And I think Singapore provides just such a base for them to expand their operations in the region.
You talk about the short-term gyration. Singapore has already revised downwards its growth projection for the year. Would you have to relook at that, you think, given growing uncertainties?
Well, the numbers will come out soon from my ministry this month, and I shall not reveal state secret at this point in time.
But we're looking at 1.5%. Is there risk it could go below 1%? I mean, there's a lot of talk about a possible recession in the country.
At this point in time, I don't think that we are looking at a recession just yet. But of course, there are many factors that we're watching closely, and the government will be ready to step in and help our companies and businesses adjust if need be.
No recession, how about a technical recession? Two consecutive quarters, basically, of a contraction.
Well, we'll see.
What are your main concerns right now?
My main concern at this point in time is to make sure that in this very volatile environment, we continue to help our businesses adjust their operations to be much more efficient, much more manpower lean, and to help them diversify the markets beyond Singapore. Because in a world where there might be a bifurcation or a fragmentation of the global trading system, our job is to make sure that Singapore businesses can continue to access opportunities across the entire globe. And this is why we are continuing to sign as many free trade agreements as possible with as many countries as we can so that our businesses can continue to enjoy that. But having said that, beyond the conventional trade issues that we are dealing with, I think we also have new opportunities, especially on the digital economy front. And this is the reason why Singapore is working closely with Japan and Australia to lead the WTO GSI initiative to get people to come onto the same standards. Because for us, the longer term issue, the biggest challenge is this, the biggest question is this: is the world in the next 10, 15 years going to be a much more integrated system? Or is the world going to be a much more fragmented system? Our prosperity, the global prosperity over the last 50 years have been underpinned by a more integrated global system whereby multinational and all the production chains, all the supply chains are optimized at a global level. If the world becomes a much more fragmented system, then many companies, many countries will optimize their production and supply chains at the local level. this will be a net loss for everyone.
Minister, you talk about the need for WTO reforms, and of course Trump has supported that, and Trump is also saying he's basically singling out countries which he deems as adopting unfair practices. In that vein, Singapore, many people don't know that is deemed and taken as a developing nation. It has a developing nation status. Why does it still hold that developing nation status?
First, I think we need to separate the two issues. There's developing country status that have many factors to consider, and the second issue is whether Singapore avails ourselves to the special and differential treatment. We have never availed ourselves to the special and differential treatment on the trade negotiation front. So on that basis, we have no issue with the U.S. because we have always believed that any countries that wants to avail themselves to the special and differential treatment should be based on their circumstances and not just on a unidimensional evaluation, either on the GDP or GDP per capita. In fact, Singapore is working with the U.S. and many other partners to progress the WTO system.
So, following that, does it make sense for Singapore to voluntarily get itself out of that list of developing nation status?
So, as I said, there's two separate issues. Developing country status is evaluated on a certain set of factors. But as far as our work with the U.S. is concerned, we don't avail ourselves to the special and differential treatment. So we have no issue, and I have spoken to Bob, USTR, Bob Lighthizer, Ambassador Lighthizer previously, and I think he understood our position.
Of course, Singapore has always compared itself to Hong Kong. What do you make of the protest, the prolonged protest, and what's deemed as instability in Hong Kong? And is Singapore gaining in any way because of that?
I think we watch the situation in Hong Kong very carefully because Hong Kong is part of the entire global system and definitely very much part of the Asian system. And we wish Hong Kong well. We wish that they will be able to settle their differences, but they will need to settle their differences themselves. And if something bad happens to Hong Kong, I don't think it does anybody any good around the region as well.
Just one final question, Minister. I mean, Singapore moving towards a digital economy, and many companies have complained about the lack of talent. Is there a reason, at what stage would you reconsider the measures put in place to limit the talent coming to Singapore?
In fact, Singapore has never limited the top talent coming to Singapore. As I mentioned to you the previous time, we have always tried to tighten our belt at the lower tiers whereby...
Are there measures that can be implemented to reduce the concerns and the complaints of companies?
So, in fact, yesterday, 2 days ago, we have just announced the Tech at SG scheme, which is to facilitate global companies, startup who wants to base their operations in Singapore to have access to not just Singapore talent, but the global talent around the world. These are the people that we are looking at are the people that can run huge project teams in the hundreds and thousands of programmers. These are the people that will take the technology companies to the next level. These are not the people competing with the average Singaporean. These are people competing for Singapore to create more jobs for fellow Singaporeans. So I don't think we have ever closed our door to talent. And our message to the world is simply this: Singapore is open for business. We welcome all the talent that would like to come here and work with fellow Singaporeans to compete on the global stage. What we are trying to do is to make sure that the rest of the economy become a bit more manpower lean so that we are less dependent on the lower skilled labor, and that in turn allow us a more policy space to open up options for the really good people that Singaporeans should work with as Team Singapore.